In the cold corridors of the Galactic Naval Academy, where alien cadets tower over their human counterparts and strength determines hierarchy, nobody expects the smallest species to make the biggest impact. When centuries of accumulated prejudice explode into violence, and the strongest warriors find themselves helpless against brutality, sometimes it takes the most unlikely hero to remind everyone what true courage looks like. This is the story of how one moment of intervention changed not just a life, but the entire foundation of how the galaxy sees humanity. Because when push comes to shove, humans don't just fight back, they fight for others, even when those others have never fought for them. The metallic corridors of Kepler Station's Naval Academy hummed with the low vibration of artificial gravity generators, a constant reminder that they were floating in the void between stars. Cadet Maya Chan pressed her back against the cool wall, watching the stream of alien cadets flow past her like a river of scales, fur, and chitinous armor. At barely 5 feet tall, she had grown accustomed to being invisible in crowds dominated by beings that averaged 8 to 12 feet in height. The Galactic Naval Academy had been humanity's greatest achievement when Earth finally earned its place among the star-traveling civilizations. For the first time in their species' history, humans could learn alongside the greatest military minds in the galaxy. The reality, however, proved far different from the recruitment holos that had played endlessly on Earth's networks. Maya tucked her data pad closer to her chest as a group of Vortak cadets thundered past, their massive forms casting shadows that momentarily blocked the artificial sunlight streaming through the observation windows. The Vortak resembled Earth's ancient dinosaurs, if dinosaurs had evolved opposable thumbs and developed faster than light travel. Their natural armor plating clicked rhythmically as they walked, a sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat during her 6 months at the academy. Another day in paradise, Maya muttered under her breath, checking her schedule. Advanced Tactical Theory with instructors ArcTH, followed by Zero-G combat training, then Xenobiology. A full day of classes where she would be the smallest being in every room, where her voice would be drowned out by the deeper tones of species whose vocal cords were designed for different atmospheric pressures. The Academy's main corridor stretched before her like a canyon, its walls lined with holographic displays showing the great battles of galactic history. The Siege of Proxima, where Alterian forces held off a Devourer's invasion for 3 months. The Battle of the Neutron Fields, where crystalline strategists outmaneuvered a fleet twice their size. Notable in their absence were any significant human contributions to galactic military history. Maya had memorized every battle displayed in these halls, not because they were required reading, but because she was searching for something. Some proof that her species belonged here, that humans had more to offer than just enthusiasm and determination. So far, she had found only footnotes. Humans as support staff. Humans as translators. Humans as the latest addition to the galactic community, still learning to walk among giants. She turned left into the Tactical Studies wing, where the corridors narrowed slightly. The architecture here was older, designed before humans joined the academy, and every doorway required her to duck slightly while forcing larger species to bend dramatically. It was a small equalizer that Maya appreciated, even if it was entirely accidental. The sound of raised voices echoed from around the corner, speaking in the guttural tones of the Krillian language. Maya's translation implant converted the words into something she could understand, though the aggressive tone needed no translation. She slowed her pace, recognizing the particular edge that meant trouble was brewing. "You dare question my tactical assessment, Scaleback?" The voice belonged to Cadet Throckmar, a Krillian whose species resembled a cross between Earth's bears and crocodiles. Throckmar stood nearly 10 feet tall and had never missed an opportunity to remind smaller species of their place in the Academy's unofficial hierarchy. "I merely suggested that your strategy failed to account for enemy mobility," came the measured response. Maya recognized the voice immediately. Cadet Zska of the Reptarian Confederation, one of the few beings at the Academy who actually bothered to learn human names. The Reptarians were an ancient species, their civilization dating back millions of years, but they had never developed the physical prowess that marked the galaxy's dominant military cultures. Maya rounded the corner and found exactly what she expected. Throckmar loomed over Zska, who was pressed against the wall with his delicate, scaled hands raised defensively. 3 other Krillian cadets flanked their leader, forming a semicircle that blocked any escape route. The corridor was otherwise empty, which was both fortunate and unfortunate. No innocent bystanders, but also no witnesses or potential help. Zska's large, golden eyes darted nervously between his tormentors. The Reptarian species had evolved from creatures similar to Earth's iguanas, though they had developed sophisticated brains and delicate hands perfect for their role as the galaxy's premier engineers and mathematicians. What they hadn't developed was any capacity for physical confrontation. Your suggestion implies that I don't understand basic tactical principles, Prockmar continued, his massive form pressing closer to ZSSK. Perhaps you need a reminder of why my species leads assault forces while yours cowers in engine rooms. Maya's stomach tightened. She had seen this pattern before, though usually it ended with the victim finding an excuse to leave before things escalated. Prockmar was different from the usual academy bullies. He genuinely believed in species hierarchy, convinced that physical dominance translated directly to intellectual and moral superiority. I meant no disrespect, ZSSK said, his voice carrying the slight hiss that marked emotional stress in his species. I was merely offering an alternative perspective based on the historical data from the Alterian campaigns. One of Prockmar's companions, a female Krillian named Vorcha, let out a barking laugh. Historical data. Always hiding behind your computers and calculations. When did any of your kind ever win a real battle? Maya knew the answer to that question, though she doubted any of the Krillians did. The Reptarians had been instrumental in developing the defensive systems that protected the galaxy's core worlds from devourer incursions. Their mathematical models had saved billions of lives by predicting enemy movement patterns. But those victories were quiet ones, won in computer simulations and engineering bays rather than on dramatic battlefields. The Battle of Kepler's Eye, Maya said, stepping into the corridor's intersection. Her voice carried clearly in the metallic space, causing all 5 aliens to turn toward her. Reptarian tactical analysis identified the gravitational anomaly that allowed Admiral Vextar to position his fleet for the decisive strike. Without Reptarian calculations, the 7th Fleet would have been destroyed by the binary system's tidal forces. Prockmar's massive head swiveled toward her, his predatory eyes narrowing. The human child speaks. Tell me, little one, were any humans present at Kepler's Eye? Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. No. That battle was fought 12 years before first contact with Earth. Then, perhaps you should limit your commentary to subjects your species actually understands, Prockmar rumbled. Or better yet, remain silent while real warriors discuss important matters. The dismissal stung, but Maya had endured worse during her months at the academy. What bothered her more was watching ZSSK's shoulders slump in defeat. The Reptarian had been kind to her since her arrival, one of the few beings who bothered to include her in study groups or acknowledge her presence in shared classes. Cadet ZSSK's analysis was correct, Maya continued, ignoring Prockmar's glare. The mobility factor you dismissed is actually critical in modern fleet engagements. The Alterian campaigns prove that static defensive positions are vulnerable to rapid repositioning tactics. Vorcha stepped forward, her claws extending slightly from their sheaths. The human wishes to join the scaleback in his embarrassment. How touching. Maya's training kicked in, muscle memory from countless hours in the Academy's combat simulators. She shifted her weight to the balls of her feet, letting her hands hang loose at her sides. The movement was subtle, but she saw ZSSK's eyes widen slightly in recognition. There's no need for anyone to be embarrassed, Maya said calmly. We're all here to learn from each other. The Academy's mission statement specifically emphasizes the value of diverse perspectives in tactical analysis. Prockmar's laugh was like grinding stone. Diverse perspectives. Yes, let's hear from the newest species in the galaxy about military strategy. Tell us, human, what has your kind contributed to galactic security? What battles have you won? What enemies have you defeated? The questions hung in the air like an accusation. Maya felt the familiar weight of her species' brief presence in galactic affairs. Humans had been traveling between stars for less than 50 years. Their contributions to galactic civilization were measured in enthusiasm and potential rather than actual achievements. We're learning, Maya said simply. Just like everyone else here. Learning, Prockmar repeated mockingly. From your betters. Perhaps it's time you learned something about respect. The Krillian's massive hand shot out toward Maya's chest, intending to shove her against the wall as he had done to ZSSK. It was a casual gesture, the kind of casual dominance display that larger species use to remind smaller ones of their place. Maya's hand moved without conscious thought. Her palm intercepted Prockmar's wrist, redirecting the force of his push rather than trying to stop it directly. The technique was pure human martial arts, adapted for low-gravity environments and refined through hours of practice against the Academy's combat holograms. Throckmar's eyes widened in surprise as his own momentum carried him past Maya, his hand striking the wall where she had been standing a moment before. The metallic bang echoed through the corridor like a gunshot. Impossible, Vorcha breathed. The human moved faster then. Maya had already shifted position, placing herself between Throckmar and ZSSK. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her training kept her breathing steady and her stance balanced. She had just done something unprecedented at the Academy. A human had successfully evaded a Krillian's attack. Throckmar turned slowly, his predatory features twisted with disbelief and growing rage. "You dare touch me?" "You touched first," Maya replied evenly. "I just didn't let you finish." The corridor fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's systems. Maya could feel ZSSK behind her, his breathing rapid and shallow with stress. The three Krillian companions had spread out slightly, their body language shifting from casual intimidation to genuine aggression. "No one has ever avoided my strike," Throckmar said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "No one." Maya's mind raced through the tactical situation. 5 opponents, all significantly larger and stronger than her. One ally who was physically incapable of fighting. A corridor with limited room for maneuver. No backup coming. The smart play was to apologize, back down, and hope Throckmar was satisfied with humiliating her verbally. Instead, Maya found herself thinking about all the small indignities she had endured since arriving at the Academy. The assumptions about human capabilities. The casual dismissals of human perspectives. The way other species spoke about her kind as if they weren't quite real members of the galactic community. "Maybe it's time you learned something new," Maya said quietly. Throckmar's roar of fury shook the corridor's walls. His massive form lunged forward, claws extended, moving with the speed and power that had made his species the galaxy's premier shock troops. Maya had perhaps 2 seconds before several hundred pounds of angry predator reached her position. In those 2 seconds, everything changed. Maya dropped low and to the right, letting Throckmar's charge carry him past her while she swept her leg toward his ankle. The move was designed not to trip him, but to alter his balance at the critical moment when his weight was committed to forward motion. Throckmar stumbled but caught himself against the wall, spinning around with remarkable agility for something his size. His second attack came as a backhanded swipe intended to knock Maya off her feet. She rolled backward, coming up in a crouch as his claws whistled through the space her head had occupied. The movement put her directly in front of ZSSK, who pressed himself against the wall with his eyes wide in terror. "Stay behind me," Maya whispered, not taking her eyes off Throckmar. The Krillian had stopped his attacks, studying her with the calculating gaze of a professional soldier. "You move well for prey," he admitted. "But you cannot run forever in this corridor." Maya knew he was right. Her advantages were speed, training, and the element of surprise. She had already used up the surprise, speed alone wouldn't be enough in an enclosed space, and her training was theoretical compared to a Krillian's natural combat instincts. What she did have was something none of them expected. Human stubbornness. "I'm not running," Maya said, rising from her crouch to face him directly. "I'm standing right here." Vorcha laughed harshly. "The human has courage, I'll grant that. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." "Courage is relative," Maya replied, her eyes never leaving Throckmar. "Sometimes it takes courage to pick on someone smaller than you. Sometimes it takes courage to stand up for someone who can't fight back. We might have different definitions." Throckmar's expression darkened. "You think your quick movements make you my equal?" "I think everyone at this academy is supposed to be treated with respect regardless of their species or size," Maya said. "I think that's what separates us from the animals." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Krillians prided themselves on their civilized nature despite their predatory appearance. Suggesting they were acting like animals was a calculated provocation. Throckmar's control snapped. He charged again, this time with the full fury of his species' warrior heritage. No more testing, no more games. He intended to end this confrontation with overwhelming force. Maya had been counting on exactly that reaction. She stepped forward to meet his charge, moving inside the range of his claws and using his own momentum against him. Her shoulders struck his center of mass at the same moment her leg hooked behind his knee. Physics took care of the rest. Throckmar's massive form crashed to the corridor floor with a thunderous impact that shook the deck plating. Maya rolled clear of his falling body, coming up in a defensive stance as the other Krillians stared in shock. For a moment, the corridor was absolutely silent. Then, Zieskiska spoke in a voice filled with awe. She defeated him. The human actually defeated a Krillian warrior. Maya looked down at Throckmar, who was pushing himself up from the floor with obvious embarrassment. His pride was wounded far more than his body, but that made him potentially more dangerous, not less. I didn't defeat anyone, Maya said clearly. I just proved that size isn't everything. Neither is species. Throckmar rose slowly to his feet, his expression unreadable. Maya tensed, ready for another attack, but the Krillian simply studied her for a long moment. What is your name, human? He asked finally. Cadet Maya Chen. Cadet Maya Chen, he repeated carefully. I will remember this. Whether that was a threat or a promise, Maya couldn't tell. But, as Throckmar and his companions disappeared down the corridor, she felt something shift in the Academy's atmosphere. Word would spread quickly among the student body. A human had stood up to a Krillian and emerged victorious. Zieskiska approached her carefully, his golden eyes bright with gratitude. I cannot adequately express my appreciation for your intervention. You don't need to, Maya replied, checking her chronometer. She was now officially late for advanced tactical theory. We look out for each other. That's what makes us better than animals. As they walked together toward their next class, Maya reflected on the morning's events. She had achieved something unprecedented in the Academy's history. But, more importantly, she had begun to understand what humanity's real contribution to galactic civilization might be. It wasn't their size or strength or ancient wisdom. It was their willingness to stand up for others, even when those others were different from themselves. Even when they had never been shown the same consideration. The corridor behind them remained empty except for a few drops of Krillian blood on the deck plating. But, the ripples from that confrontation would spread throughout Kepler Station like shockwaves from an explosion. Maya Chen had no idea that she had just changed the course of galactic history. All she knew was that she had done what felt right in the moment. Sometimes that was enough. The Academy's central dining hall buzzed with an energy Maya had never experienced before. Conversations that usually flowed in neat, species-segregated groups now rippled across traditional boundaries as news of the corridor incident spread through the student body like wildfire. Maya sat at her usual table in the human section, picking at her synthesized Earth food ration while dozens of alien eyes tracked her movements. Is it true you made Throckmar bleed? Asked Cadet James Rodriguez, sliding his tray across from her. James was one of only 12 other humans at the Academy, and, normally their paths rarely crossed outside of species-specific briefings. I didn't make him do anything, Maya replied, stabbing at her reconstituted protein with more force than necessary. He charged into a wall after missing me. That's on him. But, you did dodge him? James leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. They're saying you moved faster than his strike. Maya glanced around the dining hall. At the Krillian tables, heated discussions were taking place in their guttural language. The Ulterian cadets kept stealing glances in her direction while maintaining their typically perfect posture. Even the crystalline Zirions seemed more animated than usual, their translucent forms flickering with colors that indicated intense interest. Speed isn't the right word, Maya said carefully. Anticipation, maybe. Timing. His attack was powerful but predictable. Predictable, James repeated flatly. You call the Krillian warrior predictable. The weight of that statement settled over their table like a heavy blanket. Krillian combat doctrine had dominated galactic military thinking for over 3 centuries. Their assault tactics were studied in every military academy from the core worlds to the rim territories. Calling their methods predictable was like suggesting that gravity was optional. Zieskiska appeared at their table without warning, carrying a tray of the sulfur-based nutrients his species required. Maya had never seen him in the dining hall before. Reptarians usually ate in private to avoid the social complications of their unusual dietary needs. May I join you? He asked formally. I wish to continue our discussion from this morning. Maya gestured to an empty seat, noting how conversations at nearby tables dropped to whispers. ZSSK's presence at their table was almost as unprecedented as the morning's confrontation. There's really nothing to discuss, Maya said as ZSSK arranged his meal with typical reptarian precision. What happened was just basic physics. Mass, momentum, leverage. Basic physics, ZSSK mused, his golden eyes reflecting the dining hall's artificial light. Yes, I suppose from a human perspective, it might seem that simple. James looked between them, clearly missing part of the conversation. What am I not understanding here? ZSSK tilted his head in the gesture his species used to indicate careful consideration. The young lady has accomplished something that challenges fundamental assumptions about interspecies combat capabilities. She used techniques that no Krillian has ever encountered before. What kind of techniques? James asked. Maya sighed, knowing the conversation was heading somewhere she didn't want to go. Human martial arts. Adapted for zero-G environments. Nothing special. Nothing special, ZSSK repeated, his voice carrying that slight hiss of amusement. Cadet Chen, your species has been part of the galactic community for less than 50 years. How long have you been developing these combat techniques? Thousands of years, Maya admitted reluctantly. Maybe longer. We've always fought each other. The table fell silent. James stared at her with growing comprehension while ZSSK's eyes widened in what might have been alarm. You fought each other? James asked. Like, actual combat? Not training exercises? Maya nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Humanity's violent history was not something Earth's diplomats liked to emphasize during first contact negotiations. Wars, mostly. Sometimes just personal disputes. We've been refining hand-to-hand combat techniques for as long as we've had hands. ZSSK's scaled head turned slowly to survey the dining hall. Cadet Chen, do you understand what you're telling me? That humans used to fight a lot? Maya guessed. That humans developed practical combat experience through actual warfare spanning millennia, ZSSK corrected. Most galactic species evolved past internal conflict before developing space travel. The Krillians are warriors, yes, but their techniques are largely ceremonial, based on hunting rather than fighting other intelligent beings. Maya's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Ceremonial? The galaxy has been relatively peaceful for the past several centuries, ZSSK explained. Real combat is rare. The Devourer incursions were the last major conflict, and those required fleet actions rather than individual fighting. Most species train for combat without ever experiencing it. But, the military academies, James protested. The combat training programs. Theoretical, ZSSK said simply. Based on historical analysis and computer simulations. Very few beings in the modern galaxy have actually struck another intelligent creature with intent to harm. Maya set down her fork, her appetite completely gone. You're saying that human experience with actual fighting is unusual. I'm saying it may be unique, ZSSK corrected. Your species continued developing combat techniques through direct application while the rest of us moved to more civilized methods of conflict resolution. The implications hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Maya looked around the dining hall with new eyes, seeing not a collection of larger, stronger, more advanced species, but a group of beings who had never really learned to fight. That's impossible, James said. The Krillians are famous for their combat prowess. They lead assault forces throughout the galaxy. They lead assault forces against opponents who also lack practical combat experience, ZSSK pointed out. When facing the Devourers, they relied primarily on superior technology and numbers. Individual combat skills were rarely tested. Maya's mind raced through the tactical implications. So when Thrakmar attacked me this morning, he was using techniques designed for ceremony and intimidation rather than actual combat, ZSSK confirmed. Powerful but predictable, as you noted. He had never faced an opponent who genuinely understood fighting. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Instructor Vorthake, the Academy's senior tactical officer. The massive Alterian's crystalline exoskeleton caught the dining hall's light and scattered it in brilliant rainbows across the nearby tables. Conversations died as students scrambled to show proper respect to one of the Academy's most feared instructors. Cadet Chen, Vorthake's voice resonated through harmonic frequencies that made Maya's bones vibrate. You will report to my office immediately following the meal period. Maya's stomach dropped. Being summoned by Vorthe K was never good news. The Altarian had a reputation for ending promising careers with a single performance evaluation.
Yes, sir, Maya managed. Vorthe K's multifaceted eyes studied her for a moment that felt like hours.
Bring your combat training records.
All of them.
With that ominous instruction, the instructor glided away on his articulated legs, leaving Maya staring at her untouched meal.
Well, James said after a moment. That's not good. ZSSK, however, looked thoughtful. Actually, it might be very good indeed. Maya spent the remainder of the meal period in her quarters, gathering the requested files.
Her combat training records were embarrassingly thin compared to most academy cadets. A few months of basic hand-to-hand instruction, some zero-G movement drills, and standard weapon familiarization courses. Nothing that would explain her ability to evade a Krillian warrior's attack. What the records didn't show was her childhood on Luna Colony, where Earth's lower gravity had allowed her to develop an unusual relationship with momentum and movement. They didn't mention her father's military background or his insistence that she learn real fighting rather than the sanitized combat sports popular in Earth's peaceful society. They certainly didn't document the years she had spent practicing ancient martial arts forms in the colony's empty corridors. Maya arrived at Instructor Vorthe K's office precisely on time, her datapad clutched against her chest like a shield. The Altarian's workspace was a marvel of crystalline architecture, with surfaces that seemed to grow from the walls rather than being assembled from separate components. Vorthe K himself sat behind a desk that appeared to be carved from a single enormous gemstone. Sit, Vorthe K commanded, his voice creating harmonic echoes in the crystalline chamber.
Maya took the offered chair, which adjusted automatically to accommodate her smaller frame.
The Altarian studied her for several long moments, his multifaceted eyes catching light from impossible angles. Your combat records, he said finally.
Maya handed over her datapad, watching as Vorthe K's delicate manipulator appendages interfaced directly with the device.
Information flowed across the crystalline surfaces of his office like living light.
Minimal training, Vorthe K observed. Basic competency ratings. No advanced certifications.
He looked up from the data stream. Yet this morning you successfully evaded and countered an aggressive action by Cadet Throckmar.
Yes, sir. How? Maya had been dreading that question. Human martial arts, sir. Adapted for low-gravity environments. Elaborate. Maya took a deep breath. My father served in Earth's military before first contact. He taught me techniques that had been passed down through human cultures for thousands of years. Methods for fighting other humans. Vorthe K's crystalline form shifted slightly, colors rippling across his exoskeleton in patterns Maya couldn't interpret. Fighting other humans. Actual combat between members of your own species. Yes, sir. And these techniques proved effective against a Krillian warrior. I wouldn't say effective, sir. I just managed not to get hit. Vorthe K's harmonic laughter filled the office like the sound of wind chimes in a storm. Cadet Chen, do you understand what you accomplished this morning? I prevented an incident from escalating further? You demonstrated that human combat capabilities have been dramatically underestimated, Vorthe K corrected. For the first time since your species joined the galactic community, a human has proven capable of matching a recognized warrior culture in individual combat. Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair. It was just one incident, sir. And I didn't really match him. I just avoided his attacks. Just avoided, Vorthe K repeated, his colors shifting to patterns Maya was beginning to recognize as amusement. Cadet, no one avoids Krillian attacks. Their combat doctrine is based on overwhelming force and speed. Their techniques have been refined through centuries of military tradition. Maybe they need to update their traditions, Maya said before she could stop herself. Vorthe K's colors went completely still, which Maya suddenly realized might not be a good sign. She had just suggested that one of the galaxy's premier warrior cultures needed to learn from humanity. An interesting perspective, Vorthe K said finally. Tell me, Cadet Chen, how many other humans possess these combat skills? Maya considered the question carefully. I don't know the exact numbers, sir. But most human military personnel receive some form of hand-to-hand combat training. And many civilian populations study martial arts as recreation or exercise. Most human military personnel, Vorthe K repeated slowly. You're telling me that combat training is standard among your species' armed forces? Yes, sir. It's considered basic military preparation.
Vorthek rose from behind his desk, his crystalline form towering over Maya even in the chair designed for his proportions. He moved to one of the office's walls, which responded to his presence by displaying tactical information in flowing patterns of light. The galactic military doctrine assumes that individual combat skills are largely irrelevant in modern warfare, he said, manipulating the data streams with precise gestures. Space combat, energy weapons, automated systems. Personal fighting ability is considered a relic of primitive civilizations. Maybe space combat isn't the only kind of fighting that matters, Maya suggested carefully. Vorthek turned back to her, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the wall displays in kaleidoscopic patterns.
Explain.
Maya stood, knowing this was probably her only chance to make her case. Every military operation ultimately depends on individuals making decisions under pressure. Sometimes those individuals end up in situations where technology can't help them.
If they've never experienced real conflict, never learned to think tactically while under physical stress, how can they make the right choices when lives depend on it? You believe humans' experience with internal warfare provides superior tactical preparation. I think it provides different preparation, Maya said. Maybe valuable preparation.
Vorthek returned to his desk, colors shifting across his crystalline form in patterns that suggested deep thought.
Cadet Chen, I'm assigning you to advanced tactical studies. You will also begin teaching a supplementary course in human combat techniques. Maya's mind went blank.
Sir? Your demonstration this morning has raised questions about the Academy's current combat curriculum, Vorthek explained.
If human techniques can neutralize established warrior doctrine, then, perhaps our teaching methods require adjustment. I'm not qualified to teach anything, sir. I'm just a first-year cadet.
You're qualified by experience that no other being at this academy possesses, Vorthek corrected.
Practical knowledge of functioning combat techniques.
Maya felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak.
What if I'm wrong? What if this morning was just luck? Vorthek's harmonic laughter returned, softer this time.
Then, we'll learn that as well. But, somehow, Cadet Chen, I suspect luck had very little to do with your success. As Maya left the instructor's office, her mind spinning with the implications of her new assignment, she passed Throckmar in the corridor.
The massive Krillian nodded slightly in what might have been respect.
Tomorrow's class should be interesting, he rumbled as she passed.
Maya stopped, turning back to face him. Class?
Advanced Tactical Studies.
I hear you'll be teaching human combat techniques. Throckmar's predatory smile showed far too many teeth. I look forward to learning from you.
As the Krillian disappeared around the corner, Maya realized that her quiet life at the academy was officially over.
Word of her new teaching assignment would spread as quickly as news of the morning's confrontation. Soon every cadet at Kepler Station would know that humanity possessed combat knowledge the rest of the galaxy lacked.
She just hoped she was prepared for what came next. The corridor's observation windows showed the star field beyond, distant suns that represented civilizations humanity was still learning to understand.
Somewhere among those stars, decisions were being made that would determine humanity's role in the galactic community.
Maya Chen, 18 years old and barely 5 feet tall, had just influenced those decisions in ways she couldn't possibly comprehend. All because she had refused to let a bully pick on someone smaller than himself.
The irony was not lost on her.
The Academy's largest training hall had been reconfigured overnight. Where yesterday there had been neat rows of standard combat simulation pods, Maya now faced an amphitheater arrangement with herself at the center. 47 cadets from 12 different species watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to barely concealed hostility. She stood in the center of the training mat, her hands hanging loose at her sides, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Instructor Vorthek had made it clear that this demonstration would determine not just her future at the academy, but possibly humanity's entire relationship with galactic military doctrine. Before we begin, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly in the acoustic space designed to amplify instruction, I want to make something clear. What I'm about to show you isn't superior to your species' combat traditions.
It's just different.
A rumble of amusement came from the Krillian section. Throckmar leaned forward, his massive form balanced on the edge of his seat.
Different enough to defeat me yesterday.
You defeated yourself, Maya replied calmly.
I just got out of the way.
The assembled cadets stirred at this exchange.
Maya could see Zsk in the front row, his golden eyes bright with interest.
Behind him, the various species had naturally segregated themselves according to their usual social patterns, except for the human section, which consisted entirely of herself. Instructor Vorthake emerged from the control booth, his crystalline form catching the training hall's lights and scattering rainbows across the assembled students.
Cadet Chen will demonstrate human combat techniques using volunteer opponents. Who wishes to participate?
Maya expected Throckmar to volunteer immediately, but the Krillian remained seated.
Instead, Cadet Silkan of the Altarian Defense Corps rose gracefully from his position.
The young Altarian's crystalline exoskeleton was smaller than Vorthake's but still impressive, and his articulated limbs gave him a reach advantage that Maya couldn't hope to match. "I volunteer," Silkan announced, his harmonic voice creating pleasant echoes in the training hall.
"I am curious about these human techniques." Maya nodded, trying to hide her relief.
Altarians were formidable opponents, but they fought with precision rather than raw aggression. Their crystalline bodies were nearly unbreakable, but they moved with calculated deliberation that made them somewhat predictable.
"What are the engagement rules?" Silkan asked as he approached the center mat. Maya looked to Vorthake, who was manipulating the hall's holographic displays to record the demonstration from multiple angles. "Contact only. No attempts to actually damage each other. The goal is to demonstrate technique, not win a fight."
"Agreed," Silkan said, taking a position across from her on the mat. Maya studied her opponent's stance.
Altarian combat doctrine emphasized stability and methodical advancement. Their crystalline bodies could absorb tremendous impact, so they rarely bothered with evasive techniques.
Against most opponents, they could simply advance steadily until they achieved a position of dominance. Against a human who had grown up dodging larger, stronger opponents, their predictable approach became a weakness. "Begin when ready," Vorthake announced.
Silkan moved exactly as Maya expected.
His approach was measured and inexorable, his crystalline limbs extending in precise geometric patterns designed to control space and limit his opponent's movement options. It was beautiful, in its way, like watching a mathematical equation solve itself. Maya waited until he committed to a grabbing motion, then simply wasn't there anymore. Her movement was fluid, almost casual, as she flowed around Silkan's extended arm and positioned herself at his flank. The Altarian's head turned to track her, but his body was still committed to the grabbing motion he had initiated.
Maya's hand touched his shoulder, gently but firmly. "Contact."
Silkan straightened, his crystalline features reflecting confusion.
"How did you move so quickly?"
"I didn't move quickly," Maya explained, stepping back to give him space.
"I moved at the right time."
"You telegraphed your intention with your stance, your arm position, even your breathing."
"I just responded to information you were already providing." The assembled cadets leaned forward, murmurs rippling through the different species groups. Maya caught fragments of translation as her words were processed through various linguistic filters.
Again, Silkan requested, his harmonic voice carrying a note of determination. This time he approached more cautiously, his movements less predictable. Maya found herself working harder to read his intentions, but the fundamental problem remained.
Altarian combat doctrine assumed opponents would meet force with force, strength with strength.
They had no experience dealing with an opponent who simply refused to engage on those terms.
Maya's second demonstration involved redirecting Silkan's momentum, using his own crystalline mass against him.
She guided his advance into a controlled stumble, maintaining contact with his arm to ensure he didn't actually fall, but clearly demonstrating how his attack could be turned into vulnerability.
"Fascinating," Silkan said as they separated.
"Your techniques seem to rely on the opponent's actions rather than your own strength."
"Exactly," Maya replied. "Human martial arts assume you'll be fighting someone bigger and stronger than you.
The goal isn't to overpower them, but to use their size and strength against them." Instructor Vorthake stepped forward, his colors shifting to patterns Maya was learning to recognize as intense interest.
"Demonstrate with multiple opponents." Maya felt her stomach drop.
Fighting multiple opponents was exponentially more difficult than single combat, even in a controlled training environment. "Sir, I'm not sure that's advisable."
"2 opponents only," Vorthake clarified.
"And you may choose them." Maya scanned the assembled cadets, looking for opponents who would challenge her without being impossible to manage. Her eyes settled on two beings she had studied carefully during her months at the academy. Cadet Zieskiska, she called, causing the Reptarian's eyes to widen in surprise.
And Cadet Linshaw.
Linshaw was a member of the Zirian Collective, a species of energy-based beings who had learned to maintain physical forms through technological augmentation. Her translucent body flickered with internal light as she processed Maya's selection.
An interesting choice, Vorthake observed. One opponent focused on precision, one focused on adaptability.
Both cadets approached the center mat with obvious nervousness. Maya had deliberately chosen opponents she felt she could work with safely, beings who would challenge her technique without putting anyone at risk of actual injury.
Same rules as before, Maya announced.
Contact only, demonstrate technique, no one gets hurt.
What followed was unlike anything the Academy had ever witnessed. Maya found herself flowing between her two opponents like water, using their attempts to coordinate against them. When Zieskiska approached from one angle while Linshaw moved to cut off her escape, Maya used Linshaw's position to redirect Zieskiska's momentum while simultaneously guiding Linshaw into an off-balance position.
The demonstration became almost dance-like, with Maya serving as a fulcrum around which her opponent's attacks were redirected and neutralized. She made contact with each of them multiple times, proving her ability to strike effectively while never allowing them to coordinate their advantages. When they finally separated, all three participants were breathing heavily, and the training hall was completely silent.
Remarkable, Zieskiska said finally. I felt like I was fighting my own movements rather than an external opponent. Linshaw's form flickered with colors Maya had never seen before. The human techniques seemed designed for asymmetric warfare. Fighting opponents who possess superior individual capabilities.
Throckmar's voice cut across the training hall like a blade. Demonstrate against a real warrior. The challenge hung in the air like smoke from an explosion.
Maya turned to see the massive Krillian rising from his seat, his predatory features set in determination.
Throckmar, Vorthake warned, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of authority.
This is a training exercise.
And, I wish to train, Throckmar replied, never taking his eyes off Maya.
Yesterday I underestimated the human. Today I will not make that mistake. Maya felt ice form in her stomach.
Yesterday's encounter had been pure instinct, reflexes taking over when she was surprised and threatened.
This would be different.
This would be a Krillian warrior, fully prepared and focused, against a human who had already shown her capabilities. It's all right, Maya said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. But we modify the rules.
No claws extended, no attempt to actually grab or throw. Touch contact only. Throckmar's predatory smile showed teeth designed for tearing flesh.
Agreed.
As the massive Krillian approached the center mat, Maya found herself thinking about her father's lessons in their family quarters on Luna Colony.
Real fighting, he had always said, is about making good decisions under pressure.
Everything else is just technique. Throckmar's approach was completely different from his attack the previous day.
Where before he had relied on overwhelming force and speed, now he moved with the calculated patience of a professional soldier. He had clearly spent time analyzing yesterday's encounter and adjusting his tactics accordingly. Maya circled him warily, looking for patterns in his movement. Krillian combat doctrine emphasized closing to grappling range, where their natural armor and strength advantages became overwhelming. Her job was to prevent that from ever happening. Throckmar feinted left, then exploded forward in a rush that was faster than Maya had expected. She managed to avoid his initial grab, but found herself pressed against the edge of the training mat with limited room for maneuver. The Krillian had learned from yesterday's lesson. Instead of committing fully to single attacks, he maintained balance and control, ready to adjust to her evasive movements. When Maya tried to flow around his extended arm, he was ready for her, adjusting his position to cut off her escape route. Maya found herself genuinely trapped for the first time since the demonstration began.
Throckmar's massive form blocked her movement in 3 directions, and the training mat's boundary prevented retreat in the 4th.
The training hall held its breath as Maya realized she had only one option left. Instead of trying to evade Throckmar's next attack, she would have to meet it directly. When the Krillian moved forward for his final grab, Maya stepped into him rather than away, moving inside the range of his arms. Her shoulders struck his center mass at the same moment her leg position shifted to redirect his forward momentum. For the second time in 2 days, Throckmar found himself off balance and vulnerable. But, this time, instead of falling, he adapted with the speed and skill that had made his species the galaxy's premier shock troops. Thrakmar twisted as he fell, turning his stumble into a controlled roll that brought him back to his feet in fighting position. Maya had already moved to maintain distance, but she could see respect in the Krillian's eyes that hadn't been there before. Contact confirmed, Thrakmar announced, touching his chest where Maya's shoulder had struck. The human demonstrated superior tactical adaptation under pressure. The training hall erupted in discussion as cadets from various species processed what they had witnessed. Maya stood in the center of the mat, breathing heavily, realizing that she had just proven something important not just to the academy, but to herself. Instructor Vorthake approached, his crystalline form shifting through patterns of what Maya was beginning to recognize as approval. Cadet Chen, you will continue teaching these techniques as part of the academy's standard curriculum. All species will participate. Maya nodded, though part of her wondered what she had just committed herself to. Teaching combat techniques to beings who had never experienced real fighting was going to be challenging enough. Teaching them that size and strength weren't the only factors that mattered in conflict might prove even more difficult. As the cadets filed out of the training hall, discussing the demonstration in their various languages, Thrakmar approached Maya directly. "You fought well," he said simply. "I understand now why my initial attack failed." "It wasn't about fighting well," Maya replied. "It was about thinking differently about what fighting means." Thrakmar's massive head tilted in consideration. "Perhaps. But thinking differently requires courage, and courage is the foundation of all warrior traditions." As the Krillian walked away, Maya reflected on his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe what humanity brought to the galactic community wasn't just different techniques or tactical knowledge, but a different understanding of what it meant to stand up against overwhelming odds. She looked through the training hall's observation windows at the starfield beyond, knowing that somewhere among those distant suns, other civilizations were learning about what had happened at Kepler Station. News of humanity's unexpected combat capabilities would spread throughout the galaxy, carried by the graduating cadets who would soon take positions throughout galactic military forces. Maya Chen had wanted nothing more than to defend a friend from a bully. Instead, she had begun a revolution in galactic military thinking that would reshape how the galaxy understood courage, conflict, and the surprising capabilities of the species everyone had assumed was too small to matter. The greatest battles, she was beginning to realize, weren't always fought between armies or fleets. Sometimes they were fought by individuals who simply refused to let the strong prey upon the weak. And, sometimes, those individual battles changed the course of history. 3 weeks after the demonstration in the training hall, Maya stood before Admiral Kethvar in the Academy's highest security briefing room. The ancient Alterian's crystalline form had grown dark with age, his once brilliant facets now clouded with the wisdom and weariness of centuries. Behind him, holographic displays showed tactical analyses from across the galaxy, all centered on one disturbing development. "Show me the Frontier 7 incident again," Admiral Kethvar commanded, his harmonic voice carrying the authority of someone who had shaped galactic military doctrine for longer than some species had possessed spaceflight. The room's central hologram activated, displaying the asteroid mining station that had been humanity's newest colonial outpost. Maya watched the recorded events with growing horror, even though she had seen them several times already. The mining station had been attacked by a previously unknown raider fleet, ships that didn't match any known galactic design. The attackers had disabled the station's defenses with surgical precision, then deployed boarding parties that systematically overwhelmed the mixed alien-human security force. What made the recording significant wasn't the raiders' victory, but how they achieved it. "Freeze the display at timestamp 14 minutes, 37 seconds, Admiral Kethvar ordered." The hologram paused, showing the moment when the raiders' boarding party encountered the station's main security checkpoint. The defenders were typical of colonial installations, a mix of Alterian technical specialists, Krillian security officers, and human administrative personnel. Maya could see exactly what was about to happen. The raiders moved with fluid coordination, their tactics clearly designed around the principle of using opponents' strengths against them. When the Krillian guards charged, the raiders redirected their momentum into each other. When the Alterians attempted to establish defensive positions, the raiders flowed around their formations like water around stones. "They're using human combat techniques," Maya said quietly. "Modified human combat techniques," Admiral Kethvar corrected. "Enhanced for beings with superior physical capabilities and advanced technology. The question is how they learned them." Maya's blood went cold as the implications settled in. Someone had taken the tactical methods she had been teaching at the academy and weaponized them for actual warfare.
The academy's training recordings are classified, she protested. Who could have access to them? Admiral Kethvar's colors shifted to patterns Maya had learned indicated grim amusement. Cadet Chen, do you believe that revolutionary changes in military doctrine remain secret for long? The truth was obvious once she thought about it. Graduating cadets from the academy took positions throughout galactic civilization.
News of human combat capabilities would have spread naturally as those cadets shared their experiences with their new commands.
How many other attacks have there been? Maya asked. 17 confirmed incidents in the past 3 weeks, Admiral Kethvar replied.
All targeting installations with mixed populations, all using tactics derived from your teaching methods.
The weight of responsibility crashed down on Maya like a collapsing building.
Her lessons in the Academy's training halls had somehow led to real violence across the galaxy. I need to stop teaching the classes, she said immediately. No, Admiral Kethvar said firmly.
You need to teach them better. Maya stared at the ancient Altarian, not comprehending.
Sir? The raiders are using human techniques, but they don't understand human philosophy, Admiral Kethvar explained. They have learned your methods without learning your reasons. That makes them dangerous but predictable.
I don't understand. Admiral Kethvar gestured, and the holographic display shifted to show tactical analyses prepared by Galactic Intelligence Services.
The raiders are using human combat principles for conquest and domination. They have missed the fundamental point of what makes human techniques effective.
Maya studied the data streams, seeing patterns she hadn't noticed before.
The raiders' attacks were indeed based on human martial arts principles, but they were being applied with a brutality that felt wrong. Human combat techniques are defensive, she realized.
They're designed to protect the weak from the strong, not to help the strong dominate everyone else. Precisely, Admiral Kethvar confirmed.
The raiders have learned your methods but not your values. They understand how to redirect force but not why that skill was developed. The distinction was crucial.
Maya's martial arts training had always emphasized protection and de-escalation.
The goal was never to defeat opponents but to prevent them from causing harm. The raiders were using those same techniques for aggression and conquest.
What do you want me to do? Maya asked.
I want you to teach the galaxy what human combat philosophy actually means, Admiral Kethvar replied. Not just the techniques, but the principles behind them. Over the following days, Maya found herself at the center of an unprecedented mobilization. The Academy's resources were placed at her disposal as galactic military forces struggled to adapt to the new threat. Species that had never worked together were suddenly forced to coordinate their responses to raiders who seemed to understand their weaknesses better than they understood themselves. Maya's new classes were broadcast throughout the galactic military network, reaching millions of beings across dozens of species. But, instead of focusing solely on combat techniques, she began each lesson with something no military academy had ever taught before: the philosophy of protecting others. The strongest technique is meaningless without understanding why you're fighting, she told a mixed class of cadets and active military personnel via holographic link. Human martial arts weren't developed to help warriors defeat enemies. They were developed to help ordinary people protect their families, their communities, their friends. The response was immediate and dramatic. Military units that had struggled against the raiders' adapted human techniques suddenly found success when they began applying those same techniques with defensive rather than aggressive intent. The turning point came during the Battle of Proxima Station. Maya watched the engagement from the Academy's command center, where real-time tactical data flowed from the battle zone through quantum communication links. The raider fleet had attacked one of the galaxy's most important commercial hubs, expecting to achieve the same rapid victory they had enjoyed at smaller targets. Instead, they encountered a defense force that had been hastily retrained in human combat philosophy. Commander Shartai, an Altarian officer who had graduated from the academy 2 years earlier, led the station's defense with tactics that would have been incomprehensible just months before. Instead of meeting the raiders' assault with overwhelming force, his ships dispersed and regrouped in patterns designed to protect the station's civilian population while gradually wearing down the attackers' momentum. He's not trying to defeat the raider fleet, Maya observed as she watched the tactical display. He's trying to exhaust their ability to sustain the attack. Admiral Kethvar's crystalline form pulsed with colors indicating intense interest.
Explain.
Maya pointed to the holographic battle display, where Commander Shartai's forces were executing a complex series of tactical withdrawals and counterattacks. The raiders are using human techniques for aggression, so they're expecting their opponents to either flee or fight directly.
Commander Shartai is doing neither.
He's protecting what matters while making the raiders work harder and harder for smaller gains.
Classic human defensive strategy, Admiral Kethvar noted. More than that, Maya realized.
He's demonstrating that the techniques work better when you use them for protection rather than conquest.
The battle's conclusion proved her point.
The raider fleet, after hours of fighting an opponent who refused to engage on their terms, finally withdrew without achieving their objectives. It was the first time the raiders had been forced to retreat, and the victory sent shockwaves throughout the galactic military establishment. But, for Maya, the real victory came in the aftermath, when Commander Shartai's report reached the Academy. The human combat philosophy proved superior not because it made us stronger, the report stated, but because it reminded us what we were fighting for. The raiders understand how to use force, but they don't understand how to defend what matters. That distinction made all the difference. Maya read the report in her quarters, feeling a mixture of relief and pride that surprised her. 6 weeks ago, she had been an anonymous cadet trying to survive her first year at the Academy. Now her teaching methods were being studied throughout galactic civilization as a new approach to military conflict. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic military doctrine wasn't superior technology or ancient wisdom, but something much simpler, the understanding that true strength came not from the ability to dominate others, but from the willingness to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Maya activated her quarters holodisplay, expecting to see another lesson request or tactical consultation. Instead, she found herself facing a familiar scaled face.
Cadet Chen, Zsk said, his golden eyes bright with excitement.
I wanted to inform you that Reptarian Defense Command has officially adopted your teaching methods as part of our standard military training.
Maya felt a flush of pride.
The Reptarians had always been considered one of the galaxy's most defensive-minded species, their contributions to galactic security limited to engineering and logistics support. The idea that they would embrace human combat techniques seemed almost impossible.
That's wonderful news, Maya replied. How are your people adapting to the training? Zsk's expression shifted to what Maya had learned was amusement.
Better than expected. It appears that human defensive philosophy aligns naturally with Reptarian cultural values.
We have always believed that strength should serve protection rather than domination.
After the communication ended, Maya returned to her window overlooking the Academy's main plaza. Below, cadets from dozens of species moved through their daily routines, but something fundamental had changed in the weeks since her first demonstration. The rigid species segregation that had once defined Academy's social structure was breaking down as beings discovered they had more in common than their physical differences suggested.
Human techniques were being integrated into Krillian warrior training. Alterian precision was being combined with Reptarian defensive philosophy.
Even the energy-based Zirions were adapting human concepts of protection to their unique capabilities. Maya realized she was witnessing something unprecedented, the emergence of a truly galactic military culture, one based not on the dominance of any single species, but on the shared understanding that strength existed to protect those who needed protection. The door to her quarters chimed, and Maya turned to see Thrakmar standing in the entrance. The massive Krillian had become an unexpected ally in the weeks since their first confrontation, his warrior's instincts helping him understand the practical applications of human combat philosophy better than many other species.
The Admiral wishes to see you, he announced. There has been another development.
Maya followed Thrakmar through the Academy's corridors, noting how their partnership had become accepted as normal by the other cadets. A human and a Krillian working together would have been unthinkable when she first arrived at the Academy. In Admiral Kethvar's office, Maya found herself facing not just the ancient Alterian, but also a holographic representation of Fleet Admiral Northak, the Supreme Commander of Galactic Military Forces. Cadet Chen, Admiral Northak said, his voice carrying across light years through quantum communication, your teaching methods have proven their worth in combat.
The Galactic Defense Council wishes to offer you a commission as tactical philosophy instructor for the entire galactic fleet. Maya's mind went blank.
A few months ago, she had been struggling to pass basic tactics courses.
Now she was being offered a position that would make her one of the most influential military educators in the galaxy.
I'm honored, she managed, but I'm still just a first-year cadet. You're the being who revolutionized our understanding of what military strength actually means, Admiral Northak corrected. Your species may be new to the galactic community, but your insights have proven more valuable than centuries of traditional military thinking.
Maya looked at Admiral Kefar, whose ancient features showed approval and encouragement. What would my responsibilities be?
Teaching every military officer in the galaxy that true strength comes from protecting others rather than dominating them, Admiral Northak replied. Showing them that the willingness to stand up for those who can't defend themselves is the highest form of military virtue.
Maya thought about her father's lessons in their family quarters on Luna Colony. About Zsk pressed against the corridor wall while larger beings intimidated him.
About Commander Shartai protecting Proxima Station not through superior force, but through superior purpose.
I accept, she said simply. As the communication ended and the admirals departed, Maya found herself alone with Throckmar in the crystal-walled office.
The Krillian studied her with his predatory eyes, but his expression held respect rather than challenge.
You realize what you have accomplished? He asked. Maya considered the question carefully.
I helped my friend when he needed help.
Throckmar's laughter was like distant thunder.
You changed how the galaxy understands warfare, strength, and the purpose of military power.
Maybe, Maya acknowledged.
But it all started with helping a friend.
As they left the office together, Maya realized that was the point. Everything else was just technique.
The willingness to help others, to protect those who needed protection, to stand up against overwhelming odds for the right reasons, that was what made the difference.
Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't superior technology or ancient wisdom.
It was the simple understanding that true strength existed not to dominate, but to serve. Not to conquer, but to protect. And, sometimes, that understanding was enough to change the course of history. 5 years after Maya Chen first stepped into a corridor to defend a friend, she stood on the command deck of the GSV Harmony, watching the final evacuation ships clear the danger zone around Kepler Station. The academy that had shaped her understanding of galactic civilization was about to become a battlefield, and, this time, the lessons she had taught would be tested against an enemy that understood human combat philosophy all too well.
Final evacuation transport has cleared minimum safe distance, reported Commander Zsk from the tactical station.
The Reptarian had grown into one of the fleet's most respected tactical officers, his analytical mind perfectly suited to the defensive strategies that had become the galactic military's new doctrine.
Maya nodded, her attention focused on the main display showing the approaching enemy fleet.
The raiders who had plagued the galaxy for the past 5 years had finally revealed themselves, and the truth was more disturbing than anyone had imagined.
Magnify the lead ship, Maya ordered.
The display zoomed in on the flagship of the raider fleet, and Maya felt her stomach tighten with recognition. The ship's design was unmistakably human, but enhanced with technologies that shouldn't have existed.
Weapons that combined Earth's kinetic principles with alien energy sources.
Armor that merged human material science with Alterian crystalline structures. Captain, came a voice from the communications station, incoming transmission from the raider flagship. On screen, Maya replied, though she already knew what she would see. The face that appeared on the main display was human, but hardened by years of warfare and twisted by an ideology that Maya recognized with growing horror. Colonel Marcus Webb had been one of Earth's most decorated military officers before the formation of the galactic community. He had also been one of the most vocal opponents of humanity's integration with alien civilizations. "Hello, Maya," Webb said, his voice carrying across the void with casual familiarity.
"It's been a long time."
Maya kept her expression neutral, though she could feel the tension ripple across the command deck.
"Colonel Webb. I wondered when you would finally show yourself." Webb's smile was cold and predatory. "Did you really think I would let you give away humanity's greatest advantage to our competitors? You've spent 5 years teaching alien species how to fight like humans. Now they're about to learn what real human warfare looks like."
The implications settled over the command deck like a shroud. Webb and his followers hadn't just stolen human combat techniques, they had been developing them in isolation, free from the philosophical constraints that Maya had tried to instill in galactic military doctrine. "You're using human methods for conquest," Maya said.
"That's not what they were designed for." "Isn't it?" Webb replied.
"You talk about protection and defense, but every human martial art was developed through actual warfare.
Real violence between real enemies.
We're simply applying those lessons honestly.
Maya felt the eyes of her bridge crew watching her reaction.
The mixed species command team represented everything she had worked to achieve, beings from different worlds working together based on shared values rather than species loyalty. There's a fundamental difference between learning from violence and celebrating it, Maya said carefully. Human martial arts evolved past pure aggression because we learned that strength without purpose leads to destruction. Webb's laughter was harsh. Purpose? The purpose of strength is to ensure your people survive while others don't. Everything else is just pretty philosophy that gets you killed. The communication ended abruptly, leaving the command deck in silence. Maya stared at the tactical display, watching as Webb's fleet moved into attack formation. 60 ships against her single vessel, all crewed by humans who had rejected everything she believed about their species' place in galactic civilization.
Captain, Zsk said quietly, the enemy fleet is using modified human tactical formations.
Their approach pattern is designed to overwhelm our defensive capabilities through coordinated assault. Maya studied the enemy's movement pattern, recognizing the underlying principles even as she saw how they had been corrupted. Webb's forces were indeed using human techniques, but they were applying them with a brutality that turned protection into predation. They're expecting us to fight like the other targets they've attacked, Maya realized. Multi-species forces trying to coordinate different tactical doctrines under pressure. Affirmative, confirmed Lieutenant Vorshon from the weapons station. The young Krillian had been one of Maya's first students when she began teaching human techniques, and his understanding of integrated combat philosophy had made him invaluable in coordinating the ship's defensive systems. Maya activated the ship's communication system, knowing that her words would be heard not just by her crew, but by the enemy fleet monitoring their transmissions. "This is Captain Chen to all hands," she began. "We're about to face humans who have taken our species' combat techniques and stripped them of their meaning. They understand how to fight, but they've forgotten why we fight. That's going to be their weakness." She could see understanding dawn on the faces of her diverse command team. Beings from a dozen different species who had learned to work together based on shared principles rather than shared genetics. "All ships," Maya continued, opening a channel to the small fleet of vessels that had remained to defend the evacuation zone, "remember what we've learned about human combat philosophy. The goal is not to defeat the enemy, but to protect what matters. As long as the evacuation zone remains secure, we've accomplished our mission." Webb's fleet opened fire with weapons that combined human ingenuity with alien technology. Energy beams that followed kinetic principles, missiles that adapted their targeting based on human pattern recognition algorithms. The initial barrage was devastating in its precision and overwhelming in its scale. But Maya's fleet didn't try to match that firepower directly. Instead, they implemented the defensive philosophy that had revolutionized galactic military doctrine. Ships that should have been destroyed absorbed damage while protecting their more vulnerable companions. Formations that appeared to be retreating actually drew the enemy into positions where their advantages were minimized. "Enemy fleet is pressing their attack," reported Commander Throckmar from the secondary tactical station. The Krillian's natural warrior instincts had been tempered by years of studying human defensive philosophy, making him Maya's most effective tactical coordinator. "Let them," Maya replied, watching the tactical display with growing satisfaction. "They're fighting to win. We're fighting to protect. That changes everything." Webb's forces had superior firepower and numbers, but they were applying human tactics with an aggression that made them predictable. They expected their opponents to either flee or meet force with force. Maya's fleet was doing neither. Instead, they were demonstrating the fundamental principle that Maya had spent 5 years teaching, that true strength came not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the willingness to sacrifice for others. The battle reached its climax when Webb's flagship broke through the defensive perimeter and aimed directly for the evacuation zone. Maya watched the enemy ships approach with calm calculation, knowing that this was the moment everything she had taught would be tested. "All ships, this is Captain Chen," she announced. "Form defensive screen around the evacuation zone. Whatever it takes." What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded galactic history. Maya's ships moved with perfect coordination, each vessel accepting damage to protect the others, formations flowing like water around the enemy's attacks while gradually wearing down their ability to sustain the assault. Webb's forces found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to be drawn into the kind of direct confrontation their tactics were designed to exploit. Every time they achieved what should have been a decisive advantage, their opponents simply adapted, regrouped, and continued protecting what mattered. The turning point came when Webb's flagship, isolated by its aggressive pursuit of the evacuation zone, found itself surrounded by Maya's entire fleet. The enemy ship was more powerful than any single vessel in Maya's command, but it was alone, cut off from support, facing opponents who understood something its crew had forgotten. "Colonel Webb," Maya said, opening a communication channel to the enemy flagship, "you have one chance to surrender. Your ship is surrounded, your fleet is scattered, and the evacuation zone remains secure."
Webb's face appeared on the main display, his expression showing disbelief and growing rage. "Impossible.
We have superior firepower, superior numbers, superior tactics." "You have superior aggression," Maya corrected.
"But you don't understand what you're fighting for.
My crew would die to protect those evacuation ships."
"Your crew is fighting to prove they're stronger than everyone else. That's not the same thing." The truth of her words became apparent as Webb's remaining ships began to withdraw from the battle zone.
Faced with an enemy that couldn't be intimidated or overwhelmed, crews that had joined the raiders for profit and dominance found their enthusiasm rapidly diminishing. Webb's flagship fired one final barrage at the evacuation zone, but Maya's ship was already moving to intercept. The GSV Harmony absorbed the full force of the enemy's weapons, her shields failing and her hull taking massive damage, but the evacuation ships remained untouched.
"Direct hit on the bridge," reported damage control.
"Captain, we've lost primary navigation and weapons control." Maya felt the ship shudder around her, but her attention remained focused on the tactical display. Webb's flagship was powering up for another attack, but the rest of his fleet was already retreating toward the edge of the system. "Secondary bridge reports ready to assume command," Commander ZSSK announced.
"Transfer command to secondary bridge," Maya ordered.
"All hands, prepare for emergency maneuvers."
What happened next would be studied in galactic military academies for generations to come. The GSV Harmony, heavily damaged in